Good evening. We're live here at Channel 17 Town Meeting Television, and there is a lot of excitement because today is the 2nd of March, but tomorrow is the 3rd of March, and that means it's Town Meeting Day, which is why we are called Town Meeting Television, to bring you the latest in the elections and the decisions that are being made in the communities that we serve. So we'll be bringing you election results tomorrow night starting at 7 o'clock. From Burlington, South Burlington, Essex, Winooski, Williston, and Colchester. And tonight we'll have a preview. We'll look at who you'll be voting for. Some of you may already know. I imagine if you are viewers of this channel, you actually have already decided. If not, maybe perhaps have already voted. But if not, here's a good opportunity to go over the issues and the candidates that you will be selecting tomorrow at your polling places or your town meeting. Of course, you can call us at 862-3966 if you have any questions or you have any comments about the upcoming election. Not only is it a local town meeting election, but it is the Vermont presidential primary, which is very exciting, I think, for all of us in Vermont, no matter how we might feel about Senator Bernie Sanders, that he is a frontrunner, presidential frontrunner. He will be in Essex tomorrow night at the fairgrounds giving a speech based on the results of what's happening on the Super Tuesday primaries. So, a lot going on here, and without further ado, let me just start with the city of Burlington. There are several contested races in the city of Burlington. Of course, to give you sort of a high level, there are contested races in Burlington and South Burlington. There is a ballot item in Essex about the merger, which is of interest. In Colchester, there are a couple of issues that are important. And then in Williston, there are no contested candidates that I'm aware of, but there are a couple of ballot questions of interest. So why don't we just take it from the top. In Ward 1, Sharon Busher, who is a very long time, maybe 23 years, I just feel like it could be even longer. She is being challenged by Zora Hightower, who is a progressive, and Jillian Scannell, a Democrat. Sharon was beat in the primary Progressive Caucus, actually, is what it is, and she's running as an independent. There is also an inspector of election, Linda Sheehy, and Ann Valdaltia, and school commissioner unopposed Eric Gorman. This year we're going to be following the inspectors of election because they are really interesting and unsung people who help keep the wheels of democracy turning, and there are a couple of contested races that are interesting. So that's in Ward 1. In Ward 8, for City Council, we see again Max Tracy, who is running as a progressive. There are several young progressives running. Max is running for re-election, and Ryan Nick is challenging him as a Democrat. Inspector of Election Andrew Champagne, who's a Democrat, who's appeared here on this program, and Khalid Al-Mubarak, who's running as a progressive. And for re-election, Stephen Carey is running as school commissioner. Not a lot of contests in the school board race, except in Ward 8, where Keith Pillsbury is being challenged by Adin Hodge. And that is an interesting race because Adin is a young man who works for Spectrum. He is part of the Somali community, came here as maybe the first Somali family that arrived, and has been grown up to be an activist and a leader of his community and the community at large, and is very deeply interested in educational issues, which is why he is challenging Keith Pillsbury, who is a longtime school board member in Ward 8. So in Ward 3, let's just get back to Ward 3, Brian Pine, the progressive. He is an incumbent. He is running in his second. He was a city councilor before, and now I think this is his second or third term as city councilor again. He is unopposed. Polly Vanderputten is running for school commissioner, and she is unopposed. And there is a hot inspector of election race in Ward 3, Barbara Alsop running as a progressive against Charlie Giannone, who is a independent. Charlie has been, he actually, full disclosure, works here and has been a field producer for many years and an inspector of election for many years. He is being challenged by Barbie Alsop. Okay, Ward 4. So Ward 4 is an interesting race because for city councilors, Sarah Carpenter, a Democrat, and Erica Reddick, an independent, are running for Kurt Wright's seat. Kurt is a longstanding Republican. He's run for mayor a few times. He was a legislator until he was unseated in November, and he works on a radio station who basically had a ruling that said that he couldn't run because that meant that any opponent would have to get equal time on the radio station per FCC regulations. However, there has been a write-in campaign mounted for Kurt Wright, and he is actively encouraging people to vote for him in that write-in campaign. I think there's some questions about whether he should be actively encouraging people to vote for him, but nonetheless, there is a write-in campaign. And so it is in effect a three-way race between Sarah Carpenter, Erica Reddick, and the incoming Kurt Wright. For ward clerk, Sal Millichamp is running, and as a Democrat, Noah Detzer, inspector of election, and Martine Gulick is unopposed for the school board. For city council in Ward 5, Nate Lantieri is a progressive, and he is running against Chip Mason, who is an incumbent Democrat. Mike Fisher is running for re-election as a school board member, and Peg Clement is running as inspector of election. In Ward 6, Karen Paul is a Democrat, unopposed for city council, and school commissioner Claire Wool, unopposed for school board. There are no candidates for ward clerk, inspector election, or inspector of election, the 1 and 3 year seats. So it's a light day in Ward 6, but there are ballot questions that we are going to get to in a moment that are pretty important. Ward 7, Ali Jang is running as an independent. He is an incumbent for city council. Monica Ivanchik is running for re-election as a school board member, and there is a race for inspector of election between Jeffrey Comstock and Jake Schumann. Again, the progressives are running folks in all of these seats, and that is interesting. Ward 8, as I mentioned, Adam Roof, Democratic incumbent, is being challenged by Jane Stromberg, part of a slate of young progressives. Inspector of elections, we have Lola Jacuzzi and Cora Smith, who appear to live in the same house and are running as inspector of election under the progressive flag. And as I mentioned, Aden Haji and Keith Pillsbury are in a race for school commissioner, Keith being the incumbent and Aden being the challenger. So I want to go over the ballot questions in Burlington because these are important and they are interesting. There is always approval of the school budget, and one of the things I've noticed from looking at all of these ballots, because part of my job is to put the results together, we have a wonderful team of people who call in with the results and write them down and compile them. So tomorrow night at 7, when we have our program here live on March 3rd, we can report them to you. So I look at all these ballots and I spend a lot of time with them, and you'll notice that this year's school budget is presented in a particular way, which is uniform across the communities, and that is that there's a school budget in Burlington. It's a $91.5 million school budget, and it also clarifies that if the budget is approved, it will result in a certain amount of education spending. In this case, almost $17,000 per equalized pupil, and that's a 5.66% higher than spending in the current year. So in Burlington, the school budget is about $17,000 per student with a 5.5% increase. In South Burlington, the school budget is $55.8 million, and that's a $17,400 per equalized students, and it's a 9.6% increase. And then in Williston, which is actually a completely different district, it's a whole district, so it is included here. It's the Champlain Valley School District. They have an $82.3 million budget. It costs them $16,500 per equalized pupil, and they're going for a 3.5% increase. That's interesting. And then in Winooski, do I have my Winooski? Where are you? Winooski. I don't seem to have Winooski. But in any event, all right, I don't have Winooski, but their increase is not very high. It's not substantially, it's not a substantial increase like you see in the city of South Burlington. So all of these schools are managing differently, but they all have to write down how much per student and what their increase is, which is a nice, clean way to explain it, I think. Approval, number 2, article number 2 for the City of Burlington is an increase in the public safety tax rate. This has not been increased in a long time. It is the police and fire tax rate. It's going to be a 0.03 cents, so I guess that is 3 cents, yes. It is for FY21, and it's a 3.5% increase, and essentially it's to buy a second ambulance and the staff to support the ambulance. There are 2 currently serving the City of Burlington, and the city believes, based on the demands on that ambulance and its team, that it's time for a third one. The proposed charter change regarding the Housing Trust Fund, which is Article 3. So currently the city sets aside about a half a cent for the Housing Trust Fund that was supported by voters years ago. And now they are looking to add a new section of the charter and to make that a 1 penny increase. No, a half a cent increase to 1 penny to be set aside for the Housing Trust Fund. So when I say 1 penny, what does that mean? It means that there will be an annual assessment, and it will be 1 cent upon the dollar of the property grand list, except when a larger rate is authorized by the voters of the city. So that is number 3, Article 3, charter change for the Housing Trust Fund. And number 4 is a housekeeping change to local election dates. So when there is a November election and a city election, the paperwork goes out to voters at the same time. So it's about changing the dates for the elections. It's a charter change, but it is essentially a housekeeping change, so that the submission of petitions relating to charter changes, ballot questions, and candidates in special elections, so that local ballots are available during state elections at the same time as state ballots 45 days prior to the election. So, Burlington people, you're going to go vote tomorrow, I am hoping. You're going to also receive a presidential primary, and you will have a ballot with the city, 4 articles, and the folks running in your community. So here we go to South Burlington. South Burlington is where the action is. There is a, Tom Chittenden is running for re-election as a city councilor, but he has no challenge. In the 2-year race, I was supposed to run some video, wasn't I, Kevin? But we're going to just go to South Burlington and run some video of the city council race between Megan Emery, who's an incumbent, and Matt Cota. And I think that the main issue has to do with parking. Matt Cota is on the DRB. He's concerned that changes to regulations related to downtown housing, or the downtown district, no longer requires as much parking. He thinks that will have an impact on the neighborhoods. Megan Emery supports those changes and believes there's too much impervious surface. I think it's more complicated than that. I think we're going to see the video related to this. Yes? Okay, so we are.
The question I have for the candidates is if they could give us some idea of how they intend to attract new business and at the same time expand our tax base.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
question.
You want to go ahead, Meg?
Sure, I'd be happy to. That is precisely what we're working on right now with City Center. That is the biggest reason I have been running for these past 5 terms and now the 6th term, is to really develop our commercial but also residential, what we call our mixed use core in City Center. And we have new developments going up there that are already paying themselves back and helping us keep our tax rate low. We also have new developments along our transit corridors. If we look at Route 7, if we look at Kennedy Drive, while some of these developments have of course stirred some controversy, I do think that they, because of their placement, they have served our tax base very well. And what I see is really key right now is making sure that these new residential developments remain close to those transit those high transit areas. If we spread out too far, we are going to be placing a strain on specifically our public works. So our road services, our plowing services, and this is something that our public works director has spoken very clearly about.
Ken's question about expanding our tax base, yes, very important. We have something that is of tremendous value here in South Burlington. You know, our natural resources, our closeness to the city of Burlington. You know, South Burlington and Chittenden County in general is the economic engine for the state, and we have a real great opportunity to grow, whether it's using our existing city center, our downtown corridors. Thousands of people travel through our streets every day in order to access the hospital, UVM, Burlington, points north and south on the highway, and we have a real opportunity to redevelop some of these areas and do it in a smart way, a way that's sustainable, the way that we have transit, that we have bus service and bike paths, and be able to walk. Creating a dense downtown, a residential, urban environment would have great effect for our economy. And also be able to use the airport. I toured an amazing facility in South Burlington just the other week called Beta Technologies, where they're developing the transportation for the future, an electric battery-powered aircraft being designed by engineers right here in South Burlington. Businesses like that, high-tech, high-paying jobs are the ones that we can attract here, and we do have room to grow. We have an industrial sector zone that we can absolutely increase, and with that brings more challenges, of course, more issues regarding traffic and infrastructure, but we're ready to meet those challenges, to grow our grand list, to expand our local economy, and I'm excited to do it.
There, just looking at the Winooski ballots, I want to just remind you can give us a call at 862-3966. We'd love to hear from you. I understand we have viewers from Italy. Hello, ciao. Thank you so much for watching. We love Facebook because we can be everywhere. So, with that said, you see there that there's a contested race in South Burlington, and also the school articles are of particular interest in South Burlington. As I mentioned, there is a school budget. The school board is looking for a 9.5% increase in spending, and then also at the same time a general obligation bond for building a new high school and a new middle school, which would be about a $209 million plus interest general obligation bond. So those two things are on your ballot there, South Burlington people, along with the Champlain Water District special meeting for some additional transmission lines and a new pump. This is to create redundancy in the system. We did a really interesting program. It reminded me of the Roman aqueducts, how they get the water from one part of the city's, one city to another. It's quite amazing. It isn't really that different than when the Romans built the aqueducts years ago, but essentially it is important to maintain the infrastructure, and the Champlain Water District, which serves 8 towns, is wrapping up its 20-year plan with the recommendation for these, the transmission and pump station in Essex and new transmission line from Water Tower Hill, which is when you go by the highway, you see the big water tower outside of Winooski. So there will be 8 communities who are voting on that one. South Burlington is one of them. Winooski also, Williston and Essex, they will be voting on that water district. In Winooski, let's just go to Winooski. We have Hal Colston and Michael Myers who are running for city council. They are unopposed. There are 2 seats. They are incumbents. And then there is a Winooski budget for the city of about $7.6 million. The amount to be raised from property tax is almost $6 million. They also would like permission to receive funds from other sources, which you see on their ballots every year. The same for the school. And then the school budget is $19 million with a $15,000, almost $16,000 per equalized pupil and a 4% increase. And then again, they have the Champlain Water District. So school budget is an important question for you in Winooski. And now we are going to go to Williston. Now, Kevin, what did we decide we were going to show? Some video.
Fairness first.
Fairness first, Essex. Let's go to Essex. Yep, okay, let's do Essex. So Essex has a really interesting ballot question, and that is not in front of me, but I will tell you. We're going to have a look at the video. You're voting tonight. There's a town meeting actually in Essex. Well, they'll be voting on the budget. and any amendments to it. And there is a ballot question having to do with representation on a merged Essex Select Board, Essex Village Trustees, and this has been introduced by the Fairness First folks. Let's have a look.
Across Vermont, there are many communities that have a town with a village nested within it. And generally, a village is formed when it needs to provide services for itself that are not needed in the outer areas of the town. That's the case with the Village of Essex Junction, which was formed in 1892 to serve itself in terms of sidewalks, fire protection around the area of the train station that had grown up back in that time. Fast forward to 1953, 1952, when IBM came to Essex, the population in the village had been larger. And since the 50s, when IBM arrived, the populations have evened out to the point where the difference in populations between the town outside of the village and the village itself is about 100 people.
Okay. How we got to putting together a petition was that we were sitting at meetings and we were watching and noticing that the town outside the village, even though it has half the population of the town, had not really any way of voicing its opinions or its needs around the joint board table, because the joint boards consist of 5 village trustees who represent the village only and 5 select board members who are beholden to the entire town. And so you're left with 11,000 people who have no one to speak for them. And we thought, since the merger plan was going to cost the folks outside the village a considerable amount of money, and that's what's under negotiation right now, maybe those folks needed to have at least an equal say at that table.
That's exactly what this charter change mechanism is all about. It is, in fact, the people bypassing their select board. It's a statute mechanism that's in the state statutes that if 5% of the voters decide to change their charter, contrary to what the select board might like, they can initiate that process.
The implication of this 3-3 is that there's this inherent challenge on the board right now. One of the concerns is that, as you can see under 2019 on the far right, there are 3 residents of the town outside the village, of the village on the select board. Village residents are select board, or town residents as well. But up until that date, we did not have that many people from the village on the board. And so this situation has been concerning to people, that they feel that because there are only 2 residents of the town outside the village, Andy being one of them, that they are not represented fully. But the fact behind that also is that there are not, in our experience, we have not had ties or votes that pitted certain residents against other residents. And in fact, we did some research, and in the last 5 years, the select board had 882 votes, and 94.9% of them were unanimous.
I started agitating for a different representation model back in 2005 when I first got into local government. I noticed that the select board was made up of 5 members of the outside the village region. And that struck me as odd, because I had friends in the village who essentially had no voice on that board. And you can say that those 5 people who lived outside the village were representing, at least theoretically, the people in the village. But I would say that until you live somewhere, you probably don't have as good a grasp of the issues as people who do live there and people who can speak up for that point of view. I continued to work, despite the fact that I've had petitions, I've had ideas of interesting configurations of the board that I've proposed, and it occurred to me once I saw the school board's ingenious solution to this, that this might also work for the select board. There are 4 from the village, 4 from outside the village. I thought it could be modified to 3 from the village and 3 from outside the village and work very well. And sure enough, when we took our petition around, it seemed to resonate with the folks we spoke with as well.
Right. Well, in Essex, we've got this merger discussion, which has been going on for years and years, and I think is going to ultimately wrap up in November with a major vote. And this is one of the votes leading up to that. Vince Franco and Andy Watts are running for select board, and they are unopposed. So you will also find that on your ballot in addition to Article 5 Essex voters. In Williston, we don't have any big contest. Jeff Fears and Joy Limoges are running for select people, and they are unopposed. And there will be a new town clerk in the town of Essex, Sarah Mason. She is unopposed. There are ballot questions that are largely housekeeping. They're continuing the cleanup of the Williston Charter. And so rather than go through them, I'm just going to encourage you to go and vote on those. And then in Colchester, again, we don't have a real contest except for library trustee Carol Anderson and Rebecca Wagner. And, but that is not true. In the select board, there is a race between Julie Hulbert and Stacy Mercure. For the select board in Colchester, Pam Laranger is unopposed, and so is Jeffrey David Bartley. And there are a number of, there's the school article in Colchester and the town budget, and then there is spending on some technology projects, $35,000 and $25,000 respectively, as well as the water district vote. So in Vermont, a lot of people, well, across the country have been thinking and talking about Bernie Sanders and his socialist inclinations, and we thought we'd run this short piece that we recorded, I think, almost 30 years ago, commenting on that exact question. Thanks so much. Don't forget to vote. See you tomorrow at 7.
We have a new mayor. Our new mayor is, the whole thing is coming up and even in national news. I have a son that lives in California, and they've even up on the dates of the status in California about what's going on in Burlington City Hall with our only socialist mayor. So I feel kind of good about that in a way, because even people across the country are interested in what's happening in Burlington City Hall.
How did we end up with a socialist mayor in Burlington? Could you imagine that that would have ever happened when you started out in politics?
I worked for Community Action for 18 years. I saw about 12 years down the road in my tenure of duty with this Community Action, I saw a need for low-income people and poor people. And poor people felt like that they did not have any place in City Hall. They felt like they weren't wanted. And I validated that on many occasions in my office. They used to come and say, just because we're low income, why do we have to be excluded from the programs in City Hall? And then we heard about what is now Mayor Sanders, and he was running for office of another type in another, in the state. So we got acquainted, and I said, I'll help you. I said, I will help you because I'm one of the senior citizens. I've just become a senior citizen at that time. And I said, I know the need more than most people around here because they come to our office for help. And they express their feelings. So he said, that's good. He said, you can help me. And then he told me what his plans were, and that he felt very strongly about trying to help all of the people, including the low-income people. And for the first time in history, and I've been around these old parts for a good many years, but for the first time, poor people, low-income people in the city of Burlington could feel freely that they could be a part of Burlington City Hall. It never was like that before. If you didn't have a lot of prestige and a lot of money and live in a big nice house up on the hill, you was not considered part of the network.